I had never imagined my peaceful life would take such a strange turn. For years, I had lived quietly with my husband, Jim, in the suburban house we bought together in our 20s. It was nothing fancy, but it was ours, and I took pride in it. I was 60 now, and while my body wasn't as spry as it used to be, I still felt young in spirit. I had taught myself how to use a computer, and even picked up some coding basics. Life was stable, maybe even predictable. That is, until Jim came to me with a suggestion that changed everything. "Maybe it's time we lived with my parents," he said one evening over dinner, as casually as if he were suggesting we repaint the living room. My heart sank. Living with his parents? This wasn't the first time he'd brought it up, but something in his tone made me feel like this time he was serious. Jim's parents, especially his mother, had always been a point of tension between us. Before we married, Jim made it clear he wanted to live independently, which was one of the reasons I agreed to marry him in the first place. But over the years, his mother had started to influence him more and more. She constantly worried about what would happen when she and Jim's father got older. "It's our duty as children to care for them," Jim would say, echoing her sentiments. I couldn't argue with that. Of course, we should care for them. But living with them, that was a different story. His mother never liked me. She thought I wasn't good enough for her precious son, and no matter what I did, I couldn't shake that feeling. Living under the same roof as her felt like a nightmare waiting to happen. As the days passed, Jim became more insistent. "You'll get used to it," he said one night when I voiced my concerns. "It's not that big of a deal. Lots of families live together." He was trying to make it sound simple, but I knew it wouldn't be. I had heard too many stories from friends about what it was like to live with in-laws. The constant judgment, the lack of privacy, the inevitable conflicts. I could already picture it. Jim's mother criticizing my cooking, questioning how I kept the house, and making snide comments about every little thing I did. And Jim's father, well, let's just say he was a bit too familiar. He had a habit of invading personal space, making me feel uncomfortable in my own home. No, living with them was not an option for me. But Jim was relentless. The more I resisted, the more he pushed. Then one Sunday morning, the unthinkable happened. At 7 a.m., the doorbell rang. I was still in my pajamas, groggy from a restless night of worrying about Jim's latest insistence on moving his parents in. When I opened the door, there they were, Jim's mother and father standing on the porch with suitcases. "Surprise!" his mother beamed. "We've come to stay." I felt the blood drain from my face. Jim appeared behind me, smiling sheepishly. I thought it'd be easier if they just came over instead of talking about it again. He spoke as if it were a minor inconvenience, not the life-altering disaster it felt like to me. I stood frozen in the doorway, my mind racing. How could he do this without even discussing it with me? They walked right past me into the house, acting like they belonged there. It was clear they weren't just visiting, they were moving in. The following weeks were a blur of frustration, confusion, and disbelief. My quiet, comfortable home was no longer mine. Jim's parents had taken over. His mother wasted no time asserting herself, commenting on everything from the way I arranged the furniture to how I did the laundry. "Oh, Dina, you shouldn't fold the towels like that," she would say, her voice dripping with condescension. I gritted my teeth, trying to keep the peace, but it was getting harder with each passing day. And then there was Jim's father. One day I caught him lying on our bed, sniffing the sheets. "These smell like you," he said with a smirk that made my skin crawl. I was furious. "What are you doing in here?" I snapped, but he just laughed it off. "I'm just checking if you washed them properly." The invasion of privacy, the disrespect, it was unbearable. I confronted Jim about it later that night. "Your father was in our bedroom, Jim. On our bed," I exclaimed, hoping he would understand how violated I felt. But Jim just shrugged. "He's just getting comfortable, Dina. They're family now, and this is their home too." His casual dismissal of my feelings made my blood boil. It was as if everything I said or felt no longer mattered. This wasn't the man I married. He was slowly becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone who put his parents' needs above mine. The final straw came when Jim, out of nowhere, confessed that he had been seeing another woman. "It's nothing serious," he said, as if that would make it better. "But I thought you should know." I was stunned. After everything I had endured, the constant invasions, the criticism, the disrespect, this was the final blow. I knew then that I couldn't stay. I packed a suitcase and left the next morning. Jim barely protested, probably thinking I would come crawling back once I cooled down, but I didn't. I checked into a hotel and began the process of filing for divorce. It wasn't easy. After all, we had built a life together, a home, but I knew I deserved better. A few weeks later, I received a call from Jim's mother. "Dina, we need to talk. It's urgent," she said, her voice unusually strained. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her. I was curious to see what she could possibly want now. When I arrived at the cafe, she and Jim's father were already seated, looking far less confident than the last time I saw them. Their smug smiles were gone, replaced by worry lines and nervous glances. "Jim's company went under," his mother blurted out as soon as I sat down. "And the house, it burned down." I stared at her, trying to process what she had just said. "What do you mean the house burned down?" I asked, though part of me didn't really want to know the answer. "It was your father-in-law's cigarette," she said, glaring at her husband, who looked sheepishly at his feet. "He fell asleep with it still lit and... well, the whole house went up in flames." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The house I had worked so hard to help pay for was gone, just like that. And Jim, he was now jobless and homeless. "We were hoping," his mother started, but her voice trailed off. I knew exactly what she was going to ask before she even said the words. "We were hoping we could stay with you." I had to stop myself from laughing out loud. After everything they had put me through, now they wanted my help? The irony was almost too much. "You want to live with me?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "After you made it clear I was no longer needed." Jim's mother fumbled for words, clearly not expecting this reaction. "We didn't mean it like that, Dina," she said, her voice desperate now. "We were wrong. Please, we have nowhere else to go." I looked at her and her husband, both of them suddenly so small, so helpless, and for a brief moment I felt a pang of sympathy. But then I remembered all the times they had belittled me, made me feel like I was nothing. "I'm sorry," I said, standing up, "but I think you'll have to figure this one out on your own." As I walked away from the cafe, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I was free. Free from their judgment. Free from the expectations that had weighed me down for years. I had a new life to build, and I wasn't going to let anyone hold me back. Over the next few months, I threw myself into learning new things. I enrolled in a programming class, where I was the oldest student by far. But that didn't bother me. I enjoyed being around the younger crowd. They were full of energy and ideas, and they made me feel alive. I even started investing, something I'd always been too afraid to try before. Slowly but surely, I was building a future that was all mine. Jim and his parents? I heard they were struggling. Jim was doing odd jobs, trying to make ends meet, but without a stable income, it wasn't easy. His parents were living on their pension, barely scraping by. It wasn't my problem anymore. I had moved on, and I didn't look back. One day, as I was walking home from class, I saw a group of children playing in the park. A little girl, no older than 10, waved at me. Her name was Tracy, one of the girls from my programming class. "Dina, can you help me with my knitting?" she asked, holding up a tangled mess of yarn. I smiled and sat down on the bench next to her. As I helped her untangle the knots, I realized how far I had come. My old life, with all its pain and frustration, felt like a distant memory. I was finally where I was meant to be. And so, with a heart full of peace and a future bright with possibility, I continued forward. I had learned that sometimes you have to let go of the things that weigh you down, even if they once meant everything to you. Life had a funny way of throwing curveballs, but I was stronger now. I could handle whatever came next.